2 carriers. The sea is crowded with American steel. 2 carrier strike groups, a dozen surface combatants, submarines, and minesweepers, the largest U.S. naval concentration in the region since the 1990s, now choke the Strait of Hormuz. Yet this fortress of firepower masks a brutal reality. The choke point, just 21 miles wide, is more exposed to disruption now than at any point since the 1988 tanker war. Sheer mass cannot close the new gaps. At its narrowest point, the Strait of Hormuz spans just 21 nautical miles between the Omani Musandam Peninsula and the Iranian coast. Yet through this slender channel passes roughly 20% of all petroleum consumed globally. Every day, tankers move about 17 to 20 million barrels of crude oil and refined products through these waters. That volume exceeds the combined daily output of Saudi Arabia and Iraq. The strait is not merely a shortcut, it is the only viable maritime exit from the Persian Gulf. The geography offers no workaround. To the east lies the Arabian Sea. To the west, the Gulf coastline holds the world's largest proven oil reserves. Pipelines exist, but their combined capacity is a fraction of the seaborne flow. The petrol line across Saudi Arabia to the Red Sea can handle roughly 5 million barrels per day. The Habshan-Fujairah pipeline from Abu Dhabi adds another 1.8 million. Even at maximum pressure, these land routes cannot replace the tanker traffic. Most of Iraq's exports, all of Kuwait's, and the bulk of Iranian and Qatari cargoes have no alternative path. The choke point is irreplaceable. If the strait were closed, the immediate shock would remove nearly a fifth of the world's oil supply. Prices would spike within hours. Strategic reserves in consuming nations could cushion the blow for roughly a month, though the exact duration depends on how quickly they are released. After that, refineries in Asia, Europe, and North America would face physical shortages. The last time the strait was seriously threatened, during the tanker war, global oil markets convulsed. Today, the volume has grown, and the buffer is thinner. Closure is not just a regional crisis. It is an economic heart attack, delivered through a 21-mile-wide artery. For decades, Tehran has repeatedly vowed to seal this choke point. The threat is not idle rhetoric. It is backed by a meticulously constructed asymmetric arsenal designed explicitly to deny a superior naval force access to the Gulf. Iran's doctrine accepts it cannot match the U.S. Navy ship for ship. Instead, it layers cheap, proliferated, and lethal systems across the shallow, confined waters of the strait and its approaches. The foundation is the naval mine. Iran holds one of the world's largest stockpiles, estimated at over 5,000 weapons, ranging from simple moored contact mines to sophisticated wake-homing varieties that lurk on the seabed. A single covert mine-laying sortie, using a dhow or a fishing vessel, could paralyze maritime traffic for weeks. Above the surface, the threat multiplies. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy operates a fleet of more than 1,000 small, fast attack craft. These speedboats, often armed with rocket-propelled grenades or heavy machine guns, practice swarming tactics in the Gulfs daily. The goal is to overwhelm an Aegis destroyer's defenses with sheer numbers, saturating its radar screens from multiple bearings simultaneously. Anchoring this layered defense are dense batteries of coastal cruise missiles. Hundreds of launchers, armed with missiles like the Noor and the Khalij Fars, are dug into the headlands overlooking the strait, camouflaged and mobile. These missiles can strike with pinpoint accuracy from over 150 miles away, making any surface ship in these narrows a permanent hostage. It is a system of naval denial measured in minutes, not days. For decades, the U.S. Navy's strategy in the Gulf was one of visible, persistent presence. It revolved around a single, continuously deployed carrier strike group. This flat top, escorted by a handful of cruisers and destroyers, was the physical guarantor of oil's free flow. Its sheer size was the message. Rotational patrols by coalition frigates and minesweepers filled the gaps, a routine designed to monitor, not necessarily to fight a sudden, full-scale closure attempt. This posture managed tensions through sheer familiarity. Iran's fast attack craft and shore-based anti-ship missile batteries were extensively catalogued. The Navy learned to live inside Iran's weapons engagement zone, betting that diplomacy and deterrence would hold. But this single-carrier framework created dangerous predictability. Iran's naval planners could tailor their tactics around one high-value unit, knowing its general position and the limited number of escort hulls available. The gaps were structural. A carrier cannot be everywhere in the confined Gulf at once, and its logistics chain was a slow-motion target. Iran exploited this by investing not in symmetrical warships, but in swarms, mines, and coastal missile ambushes. A single carrier, even with destroyers on patrol, could only cover a narrow slice of sea. It left the approaches to the Strait, the shallow Arabian Gulf, and the Gulf of Oman exposed in rotation, creating windows of vulnerability that Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy studied for precise, asymmetrical timing. The order that followed discarded rotation entirely. It called for a simultaneous surge, the kind of force convergence the Navy had wargamed for decades but rarely executed outside a major exercise. Within a matter of weeks, 2 full carrier strike groups were redirected toward the Arabian Sea. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and the USS Gerald R. Ford, each with their escorts, moved into overlapping patrol boxes south of the strait, their air wings combining to put roughly 80 strike fighters within quick reach of Hormuz. But the surface picture was only the visible layer. Below it, the Navy quietly surged additional attack submarines into the region, at least 2 in most accounts, joining the one already on station. Their precise locations were never broadcast, which was the point. The submarine force exists to create uncertainty, and in the confined bathymetry leading to the strait, that uncertainty became a weapon. Meanwhile, mine countermeasure vessels, the Navy's Avenger-class ships, plus airborne mine-hunting helicopters from Helicopter Mine Countermeasure Squadron 15, were repositioned forward into the Gulf. They did not wait for a crisis. They moved into shallow water training zones off Bahrain and the UAE, shortening their sprint time to the strait's approach channels from days to hours. Surface combatants rounded out the repositioning. Additional guided missile destroyers transited the Suez and fanned out from Rota and Norfolk, not to relieve the carriers but to thicken the screen. By the time the repositioning was complete, the force structure around the Strait of Hormuz constituted the largest concentrated naval presence the region had seen in over a decade. From the Pentagon's perspective, many of the naval assets were there for a stated reason: to ensure the Strait of Hormuz remained open. The public script was built on 3 pillars: freedom of navigation, reassurance of Gulf allies, and credible deterrence. Briefings at CENTCOM and in the E-Ring framed the repositioning not as a provocation but as a necessary, defensive adjustment to a deteriorating security environment. The legal backbone was simple. The strait is an international waterway. Iran had repeatedly threatened to mine it, swarm it, or shut it entirely. In response, the Navy began conducting a rolling series of freedom of navigation transits, destroyers and cruisers passing through the strait in daylight, broadcasting their identity, making the point that no single state could dictate access. Alongside them, mine countermeasure vessels from Bahrain shifted to a higher patrol rhythm, scanning for any sign of improvised or moored mines. Reassurance took the form of an expanded combined presence. U.S. commanders met repeatedly with counterparts in Abu Dhabi, Manama, and Riyadh. Joint exercises with Gulf navies intensified, focusing on convoy escort, boarding operations, and deconfliction. The message to GCC capitals was consistent. The United States was not walking away, and any disruption to energy exports would meet an immediate, layered response. Deterrence was a key, often unspoken subtext of many public statements. Officials rarely spelled out explicit red lines, but the massed firepower, including carrier air wings, Aegis combat systems, and attack submarines, was understood to be positioned to respond rapidly if Iranian forces attempted to mine the strait or harass commercial traffic. The official phrasing was careful. "We do not seek conflict, but we will defend maritime stability." Behind those words sat the largest concentrated naval force the region had seen in over a decade. To Tehran, the sheer scale of the deployment sent an unmistakable signal without a single direct threat. An aircraft carrier strike group contains roughly 7,500 sailors, over 60 aircraft, and a ring of guided missile destroyers capable of shooting down ballistic missiles. When a second carrier group steamed into the region in early 2024, the message was clear. Any attempt to mine the narrow shipping lanes or swarm commercial vessels with fast attack craft would be met not by a proportionate skirmish, but by overwhelming force. Iranian war planners understand that in a confined choke point, a submerged Ohio-class guided missile submarine carrying up to 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles can strike coastal launch sites and command bunkers with little warning. Beijing read the signals with equal clarity. China imports over 60% of its crude oil, and nearly half of that volume transits the Strait of Hormuz. The visible concentration of American sea power underscored the vulnerability of those tanker lanes to any disruption, and reminded Chinese strategists that a U.S. Navy willing to mass assets in one waterway could, in a crisis, interdict energy flows elsewhere. For global markets, the buildup brought a fragile, unspoken reassurance. Benchmark Brent crude prices fluctuated daily, but the presence of mine countermeasure ships and patrol squadrons operating in plain sight signaled that Washington had pre-positioned the tools to keep trade moving. No press releases promised stability, but insurers and commodity traders took note. The silent promise of rapid clearance operations kept panic from spiraling into price shocks. Even as American minesweepers and patrol craft worked to reassure global markets, the reality beneath the surface remained far more stubborn. Iran's ability to threaten the Strait of Hormuz does not hinge on matching the United States carrier for carrier. It rests on a layered suite of asymmetric weapons, which experts believe largely remains intact despite the naval buildup. One of the most persistent threats is the mine. Iran has stockpiled thousands of sophisticated moored and bottom mines, many designed to lie dormant until acoustic or magnetic signatures trigger them. Roughly 2,000 of these weapons can be deployed rapidly from fishing dhows, small boats, or even submerged launch systems. Intelligence assessments confirm that key mining choke points inside the narrow eastern approaches were pre-surveyed years ago. No amount of surface firepower can wish them away. Then there are the fast boats. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy operates over 1,000 small, heavily armed speedboats. Swarm tactics, rehearsed repeatedly in drills, aim to overwhelm larger warships through sheer numbers, speed, and confusion. These craft hide in coves and civilian marinas along the Iranian coastline, dispersing the moment tensions rise. Anti-ship missile batteries, many mobile and dug into hardened sites overlooking the strait, add a coastal layer that no carrier air wing can fully suppress in the opening hours. Iran's Ghadar-class midget submarines may be difficult to detect in the Gulf. The U.S. Navy may dominate the surface, but these chess pieces do not need to move to win. Their very presence means any miscalculation could ignite a conflict that minesweepers alone cannot contain. But the sheer density of naval power now crammed into these narrow waters creates a paradox. More ships do not simply project more strength, they offer more targets. Inside the Strait of Hormuz, the distance between a U.S. destroyer and an Iranian Revolutionary Guard speedboat can shrink to less than 500 meters. At that range, reaction times collapse to seconds. A single warning flare fired in error, a radar glitch mistaken for a missile lock, or a high-speed approach misread as an attack. Any of these can cascade before a captain can intervene. This is not hypothetical. In 2020, 11 URGS fast attack craft swarmed a group of U.S. warships in the Central Strait, crossing bows and wakes at 45 knots. The Americans fired warning shots. The Iranians pulled back. But the margin between a show of force and a firefight was roughly the width of a human hair. Now, with 3 carrier strike groups and dozens of supporting hulls packed into a 21-mile-wide alley, the number of such encounters multiplies. Every destroyer with Aegis systems and submarines may be prepared to detect threats. That very readiness shrinks the space for deliberation. A sonar ping misinterpreted as a torpedo tube door opening, a drone shadow mistaken for a cruise missile, these are not failures of procedure. They are the inevitable fog of a force concentration that may deter, but also may detonate. The buildup intended to prevent a spark could in fact be the kindling. That fog drifts beyond warships and minefields, seeping into the ledgers of traders and insurers. In the Strait of Hormuz, where roughly 21 million barrels of oil pass each day, the mere perception of danger is a combustible economic force. Markets do not wait for the first missile. They'll be afraid to go out on a limb. That's where the fruit is. They react to satellite photos of ships aligning, to a spike in encrypted fleet communications, to a single tanker rerouting its AIS broadcast. Brent crude can surge 5 to 10% in a single session on unconfirmed reports of a naval standoff. For every dollar added to a barrel, global growth may be negatively impacted. The real-time trigger often comes from the London insurance market. War risk premiums for hull and cargo can increase significantly during conflicts. Lloyd's Joint War Committee can, with a terse bulletin, designate the strait as a high-risk zone, effectively forcing shipping companies to recalculate entire route economics or halt transits. A single anchored, disabled tanker, even from a non-kinetic incident, can choke order books and elevate dry bulk and LNG rates simultaneously. Asian refiners, reliant on the strait for a significant portion of their crude, monitor security alerts closely. Just-in-time supply chains can be disrupted when AIS signals go dark, signaling potential threats. The economic consequences of a perceived threat are not hypothetical. During the 2019 tanker attacks, tanker rates leaped 50% within days, and oil import premiums rippled to end consumers from Mumbai to Shanghai. Naval massing in the region may impose additional costs on oil shipments, acting as a quiet tax. It keeps the global economy breathing shallow. But this military pressure does not operate in a vacuum. It exists alongside a fractured diplomatic landscape. The shadow of the collapsed Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, looms large over the strait. Talks to revive it have stalled, and the United States maintains a complex web of sanctions designed to cripple Iran's economy. The warships, in this context, are not just sentinels, they are a form of coercive diplomacy, a tangible reminder of the consequences should negotiations fail entirely. For Iran, the naval buildup is a double-edged sword. It strengthens its hand in one sense, presenting a credible threat that forces the world to pay attention, yet it simultaneously weakens potential off-ramps. Tehran's hardliners could frame the arrival of new destroyers as proof that Washington only understands force, potentially undermining moderates. The standoff also plays into wider regional rivalries. Saudi Arabia and its allies view the American Armada as a necessary shield against Iranian aggression, while Iran portrays it as proof of a US-led encirclement. This dynamic makes de-escalation exponentially harder. Diplomatic channels may be viewed through the lens of military posturing, making concessions seem like acts of weakness. The very presence of the fleet, intended to create space for talks, may instead be solidifying the deadlock. The deadlock breaks not with a declaration but with a single missile. At 0347 local time, a fast attack craft of the IRG's Navy breaks formation and fires a C-802 anti-ship missile at the USS Arleigh Burke, a destroyer patrolling the eastern approach. The missile is intercepted by a Standard Missile-2, but the flash illuminates the night and triggers a cascade. Within seconds, the Arleigh Burke's Aegis system classifies the launch as a hostile act and returns fire. 2 Harpoon missiles streak toward the Iranian vessel, destroying it. Minutes later, Iranian shore batteries activate. Silkworm missiles hidden in coastal revetments near Bandar Abbas lock onto the nearest targets. The USS Nimitz, roughly 40 miles inside the Gulf of Oman, detects the radar signatures. Its escorts launch a barrage of countermeasures and engage. A Silkworm gets through, striking the amphibious transport dock New York, which is carrying a Marine Expeditionary Unit. Casualties are immediate. By 0415, the strait is chaos. Iran announces it is mining the waterway. Small boats deploy bottom-influence mines in the Deepwater Channel. The U.S. the Fifth Fleet Commander has the authority to halt commercial traffic in an emergency. Oil tankers, including the Devon and Seacliff, stop dead in the water, their crews watching the horizon flash. At 05 o'clock, a mine detonates beneath the MSC Barcelona, a container ship transiting east. The explosion tears a 40-foot gash in the hull. Water rushes in. The crew abandons ship. The burning vessel drifts, blocking the inbound lane. The strait is now effectively closed. Global oil prices spike 15% in the first hour. The world watches the day the strait burns. Yet that flaming horizon is precisely what the assembled fleet is designed to prevent. 5 carrier strike groups, over a dozen surface combatants, and a submerged wall of attack submarines now form a layered shield across the Arabian Sea and the Gulf of Oman. Mine countermeasure vessels sweep the narrow approaches daily. Aegis radars track surface contacts within roughly 20 to 30 miles, limited by the radar horizon. The sheer concentration of firepower makes a classic naval blockade by Iran an almost suicidal gamble. Tehran's aging frigates and diesel boats would be detected, targeted, and sunk within minutes of leaving port. But the shield has gaps. It cannot scan every small coastal inlet or stop a fishing dhow packed with explosives. Iran has spent decades perfecting a doctrine of asymmetric swarm attacks. Hundreds of fast attack craft, anti-ship cruise missiles hidden in civilian trucks, and naval mines that cost a few $1,000s to deploy. One well-placed mine in the deep-water shipping lane can cripple a supertanker and panic global insurers. Roughly 1,500 small boats operate along Iran's 1,100-mile coastline, many indistinguishable from normal traffic until they open fire. The Navy can intercept most, but not all. Ultimately, the Strait of Hormuz is a political valve, not just a maritime one. No permanent military solution can guarantee its flow if diplomacy collapses. The buildup deters total war, but the slow bleed of guerrilla disruption remains an ever-present threat, a shadow that no destroyer's radar can illuminate.